Good evening, everyone. This is Abba Blankson. I'm the Senior Vice President for Marketing and Communications for the NAACP. Welcome to tonight's Black Men Speak virtual town hall. Tonight we are joined by Mr. Ed Gordon and a wonderful panel of folks. If you have any questions at any time during the program, just dial *3 and it will get you in the question queue. And if you want to support our town hall program, dial *8 for a one-time text. With that, I will turn it over to Mr. Ed Gordon.
Abba, thank you very much and appreciate the NAACP for helping us put this together. We'll be hearing from President Derrick Johnson at the end of this program. You know, I thought about what we have been hearing over the course of the last month or so, this new normal that we're going to walk into, and I wanted to find a way to talk to young Black men, especially, but Black men in general, about our new normal coming out of this pandemic. And so I called some brothers who I have had the luxury and the pleasure of talking to over these years. And we often talk about our future as Black men and where we go. So let me introduce you to this panel. And let me note one thing for everybody. You know, we're not going to cure the ills of anything in an hour, but we just really felt it important for us to start this conversation. So first and foremost, let me introduce you to this great group. Attorney Ben Crump joins us. He, of course, is a justice fighter, and he shepherded the cases of Trayvon Martin and Michael Brown, among many, many others. Charlamagne the God, radio and television personality, and one of the most powerful voices in media today. Marc Lamont Hill, professor and media personality, and a brother who in Philadelphia owns a bookstore. We'll get into that in just a few as well. Tip T.I. Harris, who we're having a little problem with his video feed, but he will be joining us. Hopefully we'll get that. If not, you will certainly be hearing from that entertainer, entrepreneur, and philanthropist. And finally, Lathan, content producer, television producer, and social media influencer. Brothers, to all of you, thank you so very much. And let me just throw this out. Charlamagne, I want to start with you on this. When we talk about manhood, definition of, I want us to understand that far too often, we paint these pictures of all brothers doing poorly and wrong and touched by the justice system. But we should start making sure that the narrative is that is not the majority of Black men in this country. Most of us are law abiding. Most of us are educated to a certain degree. Most of us are just good people trying to make it through. Is it incumbent upon us to make sure that we're putting out a better narrative?
Absolutely. But I think you put out a better narrative by, actions and deeds, not words and lip service. And even, to your point, a lot of times, especially where I'm from, the brothers that may or may not be abiding by the law, they're only doing that out of a means of survival. It's not like they're just, diehard sociopaths who want to commit crime for the sake of committing crime. They're probably in the street selling drugs just to keep some food on the table. So, I think that if they were in better conditions and had better opportunities presented to them, they wouldn't be, so-called criminals.
How do we change that dynamic to make sure that we're not continuing to let them fall through the cracks? We've been dealing with, I'll be 60 this year, and I've been dealing with this issue, from the cats I ran when I was in my 20s. Now, 40 years later, we're still dealing with some of the same issues.
Well, I think you got to create opportunity, right? Like, I look on this call right here, I see at least 2 former drug dealers, and myself included, so I think it's just about giving people opportunity, giving people information to let them know that there is other things that they can be involved in other than the streets. I think for so long, especially growing up in my generation, the people who we saw were successful that were Black were usually, some form of entertainer, usually a rapper and an athlete. So, you necessarily didn't think about, going to school to get a degree in whatever field. But when I look at brothers on this call, whether it's Marc Lamont Hill, whether it's Van, whether it's Ben Crump, whether it's yourself, like that lets me know that that is also a possibility. So I think all of us just got to continue to tell our stories and provide information to the next generation. Like, you can't leave the community you from and not go back and have conversations with those brothers. We're only inspired by what we see. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less. We are very visual people.
Marc, let me ask you this, and Charlamagne's right about, who you see. on a day-to-day. You know, I was struck by the fact that many people didn't even know who Robert Smith was until he wiped out the debt of that graduating class in Morehouse. I think about Tracy Maitland and John Rogers, who also run hedge funds, who are, you know, million and billionaires. You look at Obama and Hakeem Jeffries as a, for instance, in politics, or Will Packer, Hollywood player. You know, the brothers who are agents now in the NFL, who, you know, had the majority of first round draft picks. How do we make sure that we're showing teachers, doctors, engineers, and not just glorifying what has been, you know, the negative glorified for too long?
Yeah. The first thing I would say is we have to accept that this is a quintessentially American thing, right? If you look at the aspirational research on children in fourth grade, fifth grade, sixth grade, whether they're black, whether they're white, they all want to be entertainers, doctors, lawyers, pro wrestlers. You know, back in my day, like if you looked at the data, it would show that most people want those sort of unreachable jobs. But somewhere between fifth grade and ninth grade for white folk, that data shifts. And now suddenly there are jobs and things that they have access to, careers that they could imagine for themselves outside of the kind of stuff you dream about when you're 10. And the thing that makes the difference a lot of times is having the intervention, having access to doctors and lawyers and engineers and journalists so that you know that that stuff is possible for you. Part of that comes down to what we teach in school, whether it's having high school teachers that look like us, whether it's having mentors come to the school, whether it's having an education program that shows Black folk in those careers. I shouldn't be able to go through 12 years of school and not know that there were Black engineers. How can I go through school and not know who Charles Drew is? How can I not know who Benjamin Banneker is? But so often that happens. The names you mentioned, other than Barack Obama, there are a whole bunch of people who go through 12 years of public school and or private school for that matter, and don't know that Black men and women have done extraordinary things. So if you don't have access to that stuff, you won't know. And then the last piece of it, I think, is that we got to make sure we're there. You know, our goal can't be to get out the hood and not come back. Our goal can't be to say, I made it, now y'all figure it out for yourself. We got to be in those places, right? So if the next young journalist shouldn't have to figure it out for himself. They should be able to call Ed Gordon. They should be able to call Marc Lamont Hill. They should be able to call Charlamagne the guy, right? The next entrepreneur shouldn't have to reinvent the wheel. They should be able to call the great entrepreneurs we have. So this becomes, I think, part of our work is to make sure we reach back and mentor young people at the very earliest stages.
Tip, let me ask you, man, and we're glad we got your video, brother. And I appreciate you being a part of this. You have made a concerted effort for yourself, man, to get out there and make sure that you are not just a rapper and an entertainer, but you are touchable, particularly in Atlanta, but across the country. What made you want to do that, man?
I mean, I really just wanted to kind of be a reflection of the things I feel like I would have benefited from when I was a youngster. Just, you know, trying to find my way from the environment that I was born and spent my formidable years in to where I am today. So I always try to go and show, be an example of hope and show that dreams do come true. And I think it's just that accessibility to someone who's already made it. I think much to Marc's point, like that opens young people's eyes and it heightens their ambitions beyond measure.
Mm-hmm. Van, I want to ask you, man, when you look at this gathering, and I can say I'm blessed to be able to have had these conversations personally. You know, I know that all of us have at one time or another called one another, say, hey, do this for me, do that for me. What do we do to make sure that brothers understand that there should be, beyond just talk, a true brotherhood, a true sense of, you know, I have my brother's back. I am my brother's keeper.
Well, number one, we have to stay tethered. And that's why I think we're in a very specific and exciting time in the culture. I think there's never been a time before this where, like, I've heard from the majority of the men on this panel in one way or another, and you know, we've supported each other in different ways. Some of those ways are these grandiose ideas of how we're going to rebuild our communities, and some of those ways are just emotional. You know, some of those ways are just, you know, checking in on people and being participatory in their lives' journeys and endeavors, and forming a real brotherhood as Black men, I think one of the things that was systemically took from Black people, or that was attempted to be systemically taken from Black people, was the sense of interconnectivity that we share, right? So in order to compete in America, there were so few slots for us as Black men that we competed for those slots. And once we got there, a lot of times what you'd see was like, like OJ would say, OJ is from where he's from, and then OJ goes to Brentwood, and you can't even put your hands on OJ anymore until he messes up, then he's Black again. And I think having a sense of consciousness and a sense of connectivity to one another in all different aspects, when we talk about mental health, when we talk about economics, when we talk about politically, being intertwined in that way does a lot more to make sure that we're moving on code. We talk about examples, right? And how that manifests and how that matters. The dynamic is shifting. When I was mentoring kids back in the day, I remember, them knowing sort of that I was in entertainment. They always wanted to meet a T.I. They wanted to meet a Charlamagne. Those were the people they asked me, do you know these guys? When Obama was elected, it was the first time that I remember a kid coming up to me and going, okay, well, how do I become the president? Because now that is attainable. That's something that he sees that he can do. And so whatever it is, the more you can touch it, feel it, and be a part of it, you're going to feel like it's a reality. And I think a lot of people, our sisters and our brothers, are using their time and their energy to make some of these dreams seem like attainable realities for the kids that are coming behind us.
And Ben, let me say that I want to read a quote from you out of a book I've done called Conversations in Black. One of the chapters is about Black men. And you said in the book, what we have to do is not allow the legal system in American society to define our young Black men. We have to define our children. And I would go beyond that and say not just the legal system, but we've allowed society, whether it be the legal system, whether it be the media, whether it be stereotypes, to define our Black men. What do you say to that in terms of taking that narrative back? Ben? Ben, can you hear me? I think Ben's frozen there. Let me just throw that out, man. Let me throw that out to anybody in terms of us creating our narrative and not allowing other people to tell us, what Black men should and shouldn't be. Us, sculpting what we say is right for our community.
I think part of it. Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead, Mark.
I think part of it is just modeling that for each other. I mean, I look at, for example, when I look on TV now, I have new options. Just looking at the media part of it, right? I got T.I. who is modeling fatherhood and is modeling parenthood, right? When there was a time, for all the stuff you can say about hip hop has made it uncool to be a deadbeat dad. Hip hop has made it nobody raps, yo, I got 3 kids, don't fuck with none of them, right? Like there's nobody does that. There's a way that hip hop has ushered in new possibilities. We got critiques, but it's ushered in new possibilities. There's a way when I look at Charlamagne on his show every day and on social media talking about mental health. That matters. You know what I mean? That models this idea that Black men do care about themselves, that Black men can take care of themselves, that Black men can go to therapy without a problem, right? When I look at what Benjamin Crump does, standing up for Black women, not just Black men, but for Black women who have been abused by the state, that models something different in terms of Black men intervening in the lives of Black women in ways that are healthy. So I think those of us who are in positions of power or privilege, looking at somebody like Van Lathan, who's willing to stand up and speak truth to power in public, like that kind of stuff all matters. So for me, that's the key. We have to model new behavior and show new images of Black men, and those of us who have the ability to attract other voices and other people who admire us, we got to show them, look, don't listen to that other stuff. This is possible too.
I agree with Mark, and I want to add on that I don't think that it matters what other people think about us. I think it matters what we think about ourselves. I think it's important that we know that we're good fathers, we're good husbands. We know the interest that we have, in regards to mental health, academics, whatever it is. And I think as long as we know what we are and we exemplify that, we'll continue to inspire brothers and sisters that that look like us. I don't think it matters what.
But we've seen that shift though, Charlamagne. I mean, we've got to, as Marc said, portray that, because there was a time that we didn't know that, because it was just the proliferation of images that were shown were not as has been suggested now. I mean, what you are doing has changed the game in mental health. What TI has done to really show a dynamic of, in my opinion, growth, right? From A to Z. They like to stick us in, and I see that we've got Ben. Let me get Ben in, and then the other fellas, I want you to jump in. Ben, we were talking about defining our own narrative. Gil Scott Heron said, "Those who control their images control their world." Talk to me about what you've said before about not letting the legal system define us.
Certainly, we can't let this racist criminal justice system define an entire generation of our people, because the statistics are always there, and they're always going to remind us of those statistics. The statistics like 1 out of every 5 black men in states like Texas and Florida and Tennessee are convicted felons, and the experts opine if that trend continues in the next 25 years, it will be 1 out of every 3 black men in America will be a convicted felon. And so what we have to do is never, ever let this criminal justice system that was designed to help populate the prison industrial complex keep our brothers and sisters feeling like they're second-class citizens, that they're not good enough. We got to tell them, regardless, every chance we get, what label they have tried to put on our brothers and sisters, that you're still the best that we have to offer, as long as you get on a path, that your mother and father gave a gift to the world when you were born. I mean, we got to build them up as much as we can, because we know America wants to break them down every chance they get, because we were formed as a slave nation, and many believe that that's how we keep our financial prominence in the world, if we can have this prison industrial complex providing /free labor /slave labor to continue our capitalist characteristics as a country. So that is our challenge when it comes to this criminal justice system. Never ever give up. We have to always talk about precedents. I'll say this one last thing, Ed, and to the panelists. First year law school, the one thing they teach you always is about precedents. You got to base everything on precedents, because we want to have consistency in the law. Well, if black people were to accept that, the precedents for us is Dred Scott decision that said there were no rights that a black man had that a white man was bound to respect. So what we have to do is teach our people a new precedence, and that is the precedence that everything they've ever thrown at us, whether it's slavery, whether it's Jim Crow, whether it's separate but equal, whether it's the Middle Passage, everything they've ever thrown at black people, we've always been able to overcome it.
Let me throw this out to everybody. What do you want to see us do as we and the world looks at, quote unquote, new normals, new narratives? What would you like to see us do as a collective, as a group, better?
For me, well, a couple of things. Number one, I think what I would like to see us do touches on some of the things we were just talking about. And I'm going to be completely honest here. If by images and visuals and perceptions, when we talk about how Black Americans or Black men are viewed, if we're talking about that through the lens of how white Americans or white America or mainstream white America views Black men and Black people, I have to be honest with you, I couldn't care less what
Word
they think.
up, I don't give a fuck.
I couldn't care less. Not one scintilla of my being loses any sleep over what white people think about Black people. I think what we have to portray and what we have to kind of get out there is that the opinion that we have of ourselves, the way that we move within ourselves. The reality is, if you look at me and tell my story, you're going to tell the story of a man who was brought up in a 2-parent home, both sides, uncles, armed robbers, drug dealers, all of that. South Baton Rouge, the bottom, that's where I'm from. That's a real portrayal of who I am. I'm not going to clean that image up so that I look palatable to mainstream America. What I'm going to say is that there are good people in my community who want to live safe and productive lives.
Mm-hmm.
And what we have to do as people who've gotten out of those circumstances is create facilities and structures so that they can do that. And if we do that and it looks a little bit ugly first and it doesn't look right to other people, who cares?
Mm-hmm.
What we have to set a set of standards that make sense to us. We have tried for a long time in this country to stand up straight for white people. It hasn't made them treat us with one iota of respect more. Not one iota of respect more. So it's now time for us to stand up straight for each other, to lean on each other's systems, economically, politically, and socially for each other. When that happens, and it's us talking to us, we win. If we try to have the conversation with mainstream America and make sure we dot our I's and cross our T's for them, we will continue to lose in perpetuity.
Mm-hmm. Anybody jump in?
Unmute yourself, Tim.
Yes, I say I agree. I agree with everything that Van said. I think for too long we've been looking for validation from our oppressor, and their opinions of us can never validate us. I think we have to remain self-sustained and just more financially free, and understand. I believe the more we can all get the message out to the generation that we are born free. Freedom comes from God. No one can take our freedom away. We can only give it away. Or being fooled into believing that we weren't free or aren't free. And I think that's also had an enormous effect on the behavior of the generations.
I co-sign all of that.
Go ahead, Charlamagne.
No, I said I co-sign all of that. I mean, that's what I meant when I said, like, we only got to care about what we think and feel about ourselves. We got to hold each other accountable. You know what I'm saying? I'm not looking for anybody else, especially white people, to validate me or tell me how I should be perceived. They're always going to perceive me as negative anyway. We see that you can live in the best neighborhood in the world, with surrounded by all of these rich white people, and be jogging in your neighborhood with a hoodie on, and they're going to act like you don't belong there. So the only thing I care about is how we treat each other. The only thing I care about is what we teach each other. And the other thing I really do want to see happen, I want us to have conversations like this, holding each other accountable, but I don't want us to be telling our plans publicly unless we're making public demands for something. But just to be sitting around talking about what we want to do as a community and how we want a community build, I think we got to stop having them conversations publicly.
And also what we want people to what we would like to stop happening in our communities. Like I think that's, if you have an oppressor and that oppressor's agenda is to make sure that you're disenfranchised, that you have less opportunities, that you have, they want to keep the pressure on you. So the worst thing you could do is come and say, please don't continue to keep your foot on our necks. Will you please? They were like, oh, okay, so all we got to do is keep our foot on their necks and they're cool. And we got them right where we want them. I think we got to stop crying and begging and asking and just start living individually and collectively for the change that we want to see happen.
Ben, I want you to jump in. I saw you trying to jump in, and then I'm told we have a number of questions we want to get to.
Absolutely. I agree with everything the brothers have been saying. I want to make sure that we understand from our perspective the things we can do in our community. Pretty much everybody on this panel is fairly successful. We have to try as best we can to create opportunities for brothers in our community to be successful. I understand mentorship and all like that, but if we can invest back in our community, because a lot of it is redlining in our community where they have intentionally said, we're not going to put grocery stores, we're not going to put pharmacists, we're going to think of respect and value in this community. So it's incumbent upon us to go back to our community and put our law firms in the community and say, guess what? Brothers who had a negative interaction in life and they got labeled with this convicted felon and nobody will give them a job. Well, we got to create opportunities for them, because if we don't save our people, nobody else is going to try to save our people. And I know over and over again, we talk about the laws and everything and the legalized genocide, and it's real. But there is nothing that can stop me from saying I'm going to help the next 10 young brothers and sisters who want to be lawyers. I know I might can't save all of them, but you know what? I'm going to have a law firm, and we're going to have a lot of opportunities for young people of color who have never had a lawyer in their family, never had a doctor, never had an engineer. We're going to make sure that they have a place where they can come. And we talk about broadband internet, especially during the pandemic, and how it's affecting our communities. Because they have redlined broadband infrastructure, where they look at communities and they say, well, they probably can't afford our products, Ed Gordon, so we're not going to really give them the internet speed that we give to the more affluent white communities. And this is real. I'm knee deep in this litigation, because what they do over and over again, they make it where little Billy and little Becky, they can get their homework answers in 2 seconds. But then our little brothers and sisters, they can't get the answer when they're on the computer for 45 seconds, a minute, while spinning, because the infrastructure was never put into our community. And it's exacerbated now when we think about the virtual schooling that's happening all over America, where our children don't even have a computer. And if they did, they don't have the internet infrastructure to get it at the same level as other children in other communities.
And I just want to say this before we go to the questions. I want us to think about being of consequence. And I can say that every man on this panel is and has been of consequence. And by that, I mean, I think about two brothers that we lost all too early, who really touched the heart of this nation, quite frankly, but in particular, African Americans, and maybe even more in particular, African American men, and that's Kobe Bryant and Nipsey Hussle. And I will say this, had they solely been known just only as basketball players and a rapper, and if that's all they were known for, they would have been missed. It would have been tragic. But it was because they both were men of consequence, that really made them the men they were and impacted and affected our nation, and in particular, Black men. And I want us all to believe, as T.I. said, and know that we have it within us. We don't need permission to be of consequence. We all can be of consequence. And I want us to start thinking about that, teaching this to our young brothers, to know that we can be and are of consequence. All right, let me ask Abba to give us just the first question there. Abba, if you would.
Yep, we have Eric from New Jersey. Eric, go ahead with your question.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Good brothers. How y'all doing?
Good, man.
Good, man.
Peace, bro.
I'm in Central Jersey. I appreciate everything you guys doing. I appreciate this opportunity. I'm gonna just try and be brief and get straight to it. I began as just being concerned about my community, which led me to run for councilman. That began a small political career that is still going outside of that ranks. My question is this: there are a plethora of opportunities. The difference is, and I say this with, strict importance. We're not given the information that we should be getting to know that we can apply and be a part of. Therefore, is there a way that established lawyers, established doctors, established entertainers, scientists, things of that nature, we begin a reverse infrastructure of programming where it can touch base with the Y, the Boys and Girls Clubs, these inner city areas where it's sorely needed to touch base with our brothers and sisters to help them aspire to be more and do more? We need to create that kind of...
let me see if I can get some of that answer for you. And Mark, let me turn to you because I know that you have been one of those people in communities for a long, long time, and anybody else who wants to chime in. But I will say this: I do believe that sometimes it isn't because it's not there; it's because it isn't maybe readily accessible, as been suggested, or that people don't seek it because there are a number of programs that are out there. But go ahead, Mark, pick that up.
No, I think you're right. On the one hand, in terms of that lack of programs, though, part of it is that what we see in urban areas is that the things that work, the things that make you less likely to go to jail, less likely to drop out, less likely to commit suicide, less likely to to get HIV/AIDS, less likely to get pregnant while you're still a teen. Those things are boys and girls clubs, after school programs, arts education, music education, big brothers, big sisters, and in so many of our neighborhoods, they're getting closed down. And everything that's being done in school is to teach to the test. And so if it doesn't help you bubble in A instead of C on the test, then we get rid of it, like arts and music and social studies and all that other stuff. So that is part of the problem. So part of what we have to do as a community is make demands. We need to be organized and make demands. We can talk behind the scenes about what those demands might be, but when we come to the public, we need to come with a public ask that the things that were in our community and the things that need to be in our community that are in other people's communities come back to ours. That's one thing. The second thing, though, is that we can't be either or with this. We demand things from the government because we're citizens, because we pay taxes, and because we built America on our backs. But we also have to have a healthy, as Tip said, we got to have a healthy understanding of white supremacy. And we have to understand that the master's tools will never help us dismantle the master's house, as Audre Lorde said. So that means we also have to build infrastructure. We have to create networks of information so that the stuff that is there that's floating around but isn't accessible to us, the grants, the loans, the opportunities, the free SAT programs, all the stuff that gets young people from A to B, things that make people better prepared to run for office, things that make people better prepared to go to school. Those things are out there, as you said, Ed, but a lot of times we don't know how to do it. So we have to build that infrastructure. If there's not a library in your community, you might have to build something. If there's not a club or after school program in your community, you might have to make one. If there's not enough coaches in your neighborhood, you're gonna have to be that. That's not to let the government off the hook. The government still got to do what the government got to do, and we have to demand that as citizens and from these candidates. But those who have resources, have to build that stuff. And I think that's a big part of this. And lastly, we got to share that information, those that have it. Sometimes people, when they get in positions of privilege and power, they want to be the only one in the room. They want to be the only Negro in the room. They want to be the only one shining. And so we have to get rid of that bourgeois mentality and reach down and help people so that there's 10 of us in the room and 50 of us in the room so that then we can build this the way we want to.
Yeah, I want to pick up on Mark's second point. Yeah, you have to grant people access. Being that we know that a lot of folks from our community don't have the access, being that we're in certain positions, I don't care if it's somebody hitting you up on Twitter. I don't care if it's somebody, running up on you in the street and asking for information. You have to be willing to grant that person access, even if you're just giving them your email and, you have a conversation with that person to point them in the right direction. Or you can provide them an internship, or you can have them come intern at one of your businesses. We have to grant our people access.
Now, and that's so real.
I agree. If I could just chime in, because I think in addition to what Mark as well as Charlamagne said, one thing that I think is incredibly important in our communities, for our culture, for our generation, and the generations to follow us, we have to figure out ways to educate our own and not continue to allow the oppressor to educate our people for us. And the reason I say that is, if you look to a Jewish community would never send their children to a school that teaches their children that Hitler was a hero. Whereas our community, the public schools in our community, the schools that we send our children to, teach us all this stuff about Confederate soldiers and generals and how these losers were heroes. And they were fighting to keep us enslaved. So with that kind of indoctrinating, it's really counterproductive for young people to grow up with a true sense of self, having the kind of pride, having the kind of confidence that it takes to be successful once they step out there into the workforce. like we really have to create more like things like what LeBron is doing with the I Promise School. More of us who are in positions of power and privilege, as Mark said, have to create means of education so we can pass down the jewels of information that our kids so desperately need.
And that goes back to that sense of consequence. And that's what I talked about before. You know, if you just are there, to your point, Charlamagne, if we're not reaching back, we aren't people of consequence. Ben, real quick, and then I'm going to get to another question.
Yeah, we have to always be focused on making sure that we first engage our people, and then we have to educate our people, and then we have to empower our people. Um, I'm the national legal consultant for the 100th anniversary of Black Wall Street. As we all know, I pray everybody on this call, a lot of young people don't know it though about how Black Wall Street was massacred during that race riot. And we have to teach our young people that we have a history where when we invested in our communities, when we invested in each other, we thrived. I mean, we did it so good that they couldn't do anything to stop us other than to come and burn the whole community down. Because when it was all things equal and we believed in ourselves and we had our own law firms, our own clinic, our own barbershops, our own dry cleaners, and we all supported one another, there was no stopping us. Why can't we do that today? It starts with each of us making a personal commitment to do something. I know one of the things my law partner and I did, when we made our money and all this stuff, we intentionally built these big houses in our Black neighborhoods in Florida. And I know everybody talked to us like we were crazy. They say, y'all got these big mansions in the hood and y'all ain't gonna ever be able to resell them. I said, you know what? We're not trying to resell them. We're gonna always have a presence in our neighborhood. And what's so important about that is less than a mile away from me is the government housing project. And all those little Black children, when they go up to the school bus, they say, hey, Attorney Crump is my neighbor. And when they play that, I want that car, they say, I want that car. And it's not a drug dealer's car. It's a lawyer's car, somebody who they can say, I can be like, and I can educate myself if I just try to work hard. And then it's on me to go make sure I try to pick out as many of them as I can and mentor all of them, whether we have these law camps, whether we have these investigation classes, because anything that a law firm can use, I want to give at least people of color a chance at doing them. Not saying that we don't want to work with anybody else, because I have a lot of white law partners and support staff, but I also want to leave the door open for people who look like me because somebody gave me an opportunity.
All right, let me get another call in here. Abba, who do we have?
We have Reggie from Massachusetts. If you want to ask a question, just dial *3 to get in the question queue. Reggie, you are live. Go ahead with your question.
Reggie, you're up. Can you hear us?
Can you all hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Reggie.
Yes, sir.
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead.
Can y'all hear me?
Yeah, Reggie.
All right.
Oh, okay. But here's my question. Up until Brother Mark started to talk about specific policy demands, I found myself frustrated because a lot of what I've been hearing in this conversation and other conversations has been a lot of platitudes, a lot of self-help, a lot of pat yourself on the back. But what my question is like, what are the specific policy demands? And in that question, I kind of disagree with Brother Mark that, like, let's take this offline. We should state openly what are the specific policy demands, especially as Black men, as we suffer disproportionately incarceration, homelessness, joblessness. What are the specific demands, such as reparations, such as targeted infrastructure to places where there are lead in our water and in our homes, specific jobs package tailored specifically to us. And I would like each person on the panel and even the moderator as well. What are the specific policy demands that we are holding
we don't have
our
time for
politicians
everybody to say. All right, thank you, Reggie. We
Can I
don't
say
have
something
time
real
for
quick though?
everybody to say this, but let me just say to Reggie this. That whole sense of patting one on the back and platitudes and all, the reason that I think people think that that's platitudes and patting, and I've been hearing it because we haven't been doing what we say we're going to do. And if you're talking about something for decades and it's not correcting itself, part of that is you're not getting up and doing. I'll give Mark an opportunity, anybody else who wants to chime in very quickly with what he said. But I think that whole sense of platitude sometimes is an out for people who aren't seeing the power that they own to make change. To T.I.'s point, to Tip's point, the idea of us making change for ourselves is important too. But Mark, you want to pick that up real quick?
Yeah, I mean, but and that's exactly the point, Ed. Like, you know, first of all, this idea that we shouldn't pat ourselves on the back. Black men should be patting themselves on the back. Black women should be patting themselves on the back. Black men should be patting black women on the back. We live in a white supremacist world that tells black people that they got the wrong faces, the wrong hips, the wrong lips, the wrong nose, the wrong religion, that we have no history. The world teaches us that we are not human beings. So yeah, we do have to pat each other on the back. We do have to support each other. We do have to, you know, they say don't preach to the choir. Choirs need to be preached to as well. There's a whole lot of stuff happening in that choir. So we need both. So that's the first thing. The second thing I think that we got to think about, and it's really important, is I didn't say we shouldn't have public demands. What I said is, and Charlamagne said the same thing, is that we shouldn't organize in public, right?
Yeah.
Martin Luther King made public demonstrations and public tactics, but he didn't meet in front of ABC News and CBS News and say, yo, we think about sitting in front of the Pettus Bridge and we're going to squat, or we organizing this bus boycott. Let me call Bull Connor and let him know where we're going to be and at what time. No, you strategize behind the scenes and then you make a public demonstration in front. So yeah, I'm all for public demands. I don't want to go through another election without asking Democrats for nothing. I don't want to go through another 4 years without demanding things from our cities and our states. No, we need public demands. But the conversation about what those public demands are don't need to happen in front of a world that hates us. It needs to happen behind the scenes. And no, I don't think that tonight we can hash out every single thing, but starting by reinforcing to black men that it's okay to support each other, that it's okay to love each other, that it's okay to seek mental health, that it's okay to reject white supremacy, that it's okay to reject patriarchy and misogyny and transphobia. These are starting points. I don't want to be part of a movement that don't start with saying, brother, I love you, brother, I'm here for you. And what makes this panel so special, as you said, Ed, is that every single person on there has modeled that for each other and to each other in such a way that we can get to the policy conversation.
I'll jump.
Anybody? Go ahead, Van. Go ahead, Van.
I'll jump in on it and I'll be brief. I think that whereas it might be cumbersome on this call for us to talk about specific policy demands and what we're going to demand from specific candidates, Charlamagne talks a lot about a black agenda from the Democrats and about sort of economically and socially moving things. I can tell you that the edict that we should have is something that Brother Crump mentioned, was intentionality. The most important thing for black people to remember for me is that everything that was done to them was done on purpose. Okay, so all of it. There wasn't a cosmic accident that put you in the position that you're in right now. So in order to remedy something that was done intentionally, you would have to be intentional about the solution. So when you look at intentionality, you look at that from an economic standpoint. That's where your reparations come in. And, you know, there's the controversy about the ADOS platform online. It rages, but the fact of the matter is there was a very relevant conversation about what America owes to black people that started from that movement. You talk about not just the reparation standpoint, but even the social responsibility that we have to one another, but we have to be intentional. The reason why it doesn't make sense to plot out a bunch of things and put them out there for everyone to parse through is because if we give them what we want, they'll also intentionally dismantle that and get started before we've had the opportunity to build the structures that would facilitate us getting to the finish line with it. The important thing is, for the brother that was on the call, is that everyone's going to have a voice in this. From all different parts of black structure building, we're going to be able to find a way to demand from America and to demand from ourselves what we need next. But the policy points are being discussed, like in Atlanta.
Calls like this are not a vehicle for that. to your point, Van, calls like this, all I want to do is spark enough of interest to get people going. As a, for instance, I hit Charlamagne last night. We discussed what Diddy did and, what should and shouldn't be done. I mean, these are the discussions that go on. This is, to Tip's point, this is not necessarily the place to do that. These are forums. An hour on Facebook or IG Live is really just to spark people, to get them to move, to hopefully awaken them, if you will, or to give them that push that they need. But let's try to get in one more if you have anything in queue there.
Yeah, we have something from our. We have something coming from
If
our
I may
Facebook,
please, if I may
audience.
please just say one thing to Reggie, because I feel Reggie need to hear this. Reggie, don't nobody care nothing about you being agitated about our conversation before you chime in, man. All of us, we take a time out of our day, you know what I'm saying, to collectively and individually, put our mind together, think about how we could navigate our communities to a better place. And we're not looking for your nod of approval, Reggie. You dig what I'm saying? If you don't like what we doing, if you have any disagreement with it, I suggest to you, you simply be the change you want to see. Period.
Absolutely.
We doing the best
and
we
there's some truth
can,
in that. And there's some
and
real
you
truth
should be
in that,
doing the
Tip.
best you can.
The
Because
idea
black
of
people,
somebody else being a change agent, that's and that's, we all have the power to do that. And as opposed to just getting on, I understand his frustration. I have that
I get
frustration to a degree sometime, but to your point, that's not the way to solve that. Let's get that quick question in, and I'll give everybody an opportunity to chime in as we close out this hour. Abba, I'm sorry, go ahead, pick up that question.
Yeah, so the question is, what was the moment as a Black man you decided enough was enough? And what lesson did you learn from a mentor that's influenced your activism today?
Anybody want to jump in on that?
I'll jump in.
that's a good question. I mean, I don't.
It's a great.
That's a phenomenal question, man.
I'll say it for me, as a kid, 1995, my Uncle Mark comes home, sitting on the front porch with him. He teaching me how to use his left hand on the basketball court. He had been away in Hunts and Angola for maybe like 14 to 15 years. I had never met him free. I asked him what prison is like. He says, the only thing I can tell you is that it's like being down somewhere so low that no matter what you do, you can't get out from under it. And when you get out from under it, you'll never be able to get it off you. And I thought about this gentle, amazing sort of, I can't even describe what a great guy he was, that was a drug addict and a drug dealer and a killer, and just what he could have been and how he put it together. And at that point in my life, I realized that we weren't capitalizing on the talent that we had in our community. At 15, I realized that we were losing people unnecessarily. And I made the decision not to have that happen to me. And I made the decision that when I got to a point that I was able to help people move past that I would. And it stuck with me. And even though he's gone now, like, his influence on me has been forever.
I would.
I'll chime in, Ed, if I could. The turning point for me was my mother raised 3 Black boys by herself, single-handedly. And I remember I won a essay oratorical contest in our little town in North Carolina, and I was going to go to the state capitol. Her boss, her racist boss, was so racist that he told my mother she could not have the day off to go with her son, who she was so proud of. The whole project was proud that I won this contest. And it was deep because my mother, she made a decision. She could find another job, but it was important for her son to know that his life mattered. And so she lost her job. And I remember her crying, trying to think about how she's going to put food on the table. And my mother said to me, baby, always remember, life ain't fair. Life is hard. You make it fair by what you bring to the table. And if you don't bring anything to the table, don't expect nobody to let you sit down at the table. And I watched my mother over and over say, I got to figure out what I'm bringing to the table. And that never left me. And that was the turning point in my life. I said, no matter what the situation is, I'm going to bring something to the table. I'm going to make sure nobody can control the destiny of my life.
And Ben, real quick, for Reggie and some others, tell them they want substance about your book. Just give them the title. I see it behind you. There's some substance in that.
Open season. Legalize genocide of colored people, because they are trying to kill us, if not physically, kill us spiritually. And it's up to all of us to make sure they don't kill our children.
It's all kind of substance up in this joint. All right, who's next? Charlamagne,
Now,
go ahead.
I was gonna say I wouldn't consider myself an activist per se, you know what I mean? But when I was younger, you know, my father gave me the autobiography of Malcolm X to read. And you know, when I read that book, I loved it just because I watched this brother grow from, you know, Malcolm Little to Malcolm X. You know, just the evolution of a man is what inspired me. And you know, when you start reading about his teacher, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and then my father would always make me watch, you know, speeches by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. Like, just taking all of that in, let me know that I wanted to realize my full potential as a black man, and just always empower my people in some way, shape, or form. So, you know, as I grew, just as a human, and ended up, you know, as a media personality, I always remember what Malcolm X said. When Malcolm X said, you know, the person who controls the media controls the minds of the masses. So I always wanted to make sure that I was putting the right things in people's minds. Now, throughout a 23-year career and growth, of course, I didn't always do that, you know, but as you get to a certain point in your life and you get to a certain age, you just realize, man, it's not about you, and you are in this position for a reason. So that is my job. It's my job to make sure that, you know, voices like Marc Lamont Hill are heard. It's my job to make sure, you know, voices like Angela Rye are heard. It's my job as a brother that has resources to go back and invest into my communities. It's my job to, like I said, make myself accessible and give other people information so I can empower the next Charlamagne or the next T.I. or the next Robert Smith. And that, to me, is how you community build. And that's what I've always been about, just community building. Because when I look at something like the Nation of Islam, that's what they have. They have a great community that's self-sustaining, and they empower each other. And that's what I think we can have in totality in the black community.
Mark, go ahead, and then we'll close out with tips.
You know, I've been an activist since I was a kid. And the first thing that got me to be an activist was like Charlamagne, I read the autobiography of Malcolm X, and that just changed my whole life. My whole life ain't been the same since. But then there were people in my community, former Black Panthers, people who were grassroots activists that were organizing against police brutality, organizing against apartheid South Africa, and organizing to free Mumia Abu-Jamal. And so for me, when I saw those things happening, I wanted to be a part of it. And the lesson that I learned as a young activist was that when I did something, things changed. And then as I got older, I moved from not just activist, but to organizer. The more resources I got, the more ideas I had, and the more strategy I developed, I realized that being an activist is important. You can get a whole bunch of people to show up to something. You can get a whole bunch of people to show up to a party, to a rally, to a protest, but to organize an action is something totally different. And from that, I learned strategies from everybody from Angela Davis to the Dream Defenders, my brother Philip Agnew, who's younger than me, but who I learned a lot from to this day. Mm-hmm. And through organizers and activists, I learned that we can strategize and change this whole world.
Tip, go ahead, man.
I think he's frozen.
Oh, is he frozen?
Frozen, yeah.
All right, well, let me say this, and hopefully we'll get him back. For me, I lost my father at 11. He died suddenly of a heart attack. There was a man who lived a house away, Fred Hudson, who is, to this day, I'll be 60 in August, I still call him Mr. Hudson. He has been my mentor from that point on. I could model who he was. He had been an all-state basketball player, had gotten a scholarship, and only injury probably kept him away from at least trying out for the NBA. He was the youngest cat on our block, really cool, had a beautiful wife and children, and I could model myself after that. And it was somebody to look to. And I'll never forget one day, man, I was getting loud with my mother. She wanted me to take the garbage out. I was trying to go somewhere, and he heard me. And he called me, and he said, "Hey, man, come down here. I want you to help me move something." I said, "All right, you know." I ran down there. I said, what you need? What you need? Because that was my man, right? He bum rushed me, man, forearm me, slid me up the wall and said, nigga, if I ever hear you talk to your mother that way, men don't do that. He said, I will finish this. Men don't do that. And from that speech to just being able to watch him from afar, man, taught me how to be a man. I've tried to put that forth. And for me, when brothers come to me and say, hey, man, I didn't watch the news till you came on. You know, I could see somebody who looked like me, who dressed like me, who carried themselves and wasn't whitewashed in delivering the news. And that meant a lot to me. And I do think what we've been talking about is modeling. You know, there is substance out there. We got Ben's book, Conversations in Black, which many of the brothers who are on this panel on my new book, they're in that. We're out there doing, man. And as I said, Charlamagne and I were texting last night. So it's out there. I just hope that this really moves us. Let me see if Tip has come back. If not, we're going to turn it on. Oh, we lost his audio. Well, listen, man, I want to thank each and every one of you. I can say it, and Charlamagne says it all the time. If we can't say I love you, I value you, I appreciate you, we ain't worth the time of day. So let me say to each and every one of y'all, man, love you, appreciate you, and I value you. Greatly appreciate the time that you
Same
spent
right
with
to
us
you,
today.
brother. Same back to you.
My heroes,
So let
man.
me turn it to President of the NAACP, Derek Johnson. I want to thank him and the NAACP and all of their team who made this a real. We're hoping to do this again. You know, we don't want this to be the only one. This should not be our only discussion. There's a lot to be said, as Reggie told us. You know, we ain't said enough. But there's a lot of knowledge in this group, man, and we're going to get it out there and keep doing this. So let me turn it to President Johnson and say a big thank you to him and his team and all of you who've joined us this evening. Derek?
Yeah, thank you, Ed. I want to thank all the panelists for doing this. This has been enlightening for me as I was sitting here listening and thinking about the last question. And Ed and I, we're both from Detroit. And Coleman Young was the mayor. And I can recall being in elementary and middle and high school running to see television because if someone said that Coleman Young was going to be on the news, I knew he was going to get white folks straight that day. He had this saying that if you don't like the way I run the city of Detroit, take your ass on the other side of 8 miles, a dividing line for Detroit. And when we talk about the power of our community, we need to understand what the word power truly means. That we have come through a journey that we fought successfully to get control of governmental entities in Atlanta, in Detroit, in Philadelphia, in Gary, Indiana, in DC. And those mayors were under tremendous pressure. And if you grew up in DC, you loved Marion Barry because you knew that Marion Barry made you as a young person, you had a job. If you grew up in Atlanta, you appreciated what Maynard Jackson was doing because Maynard created wealth like no one else. What we lost in that concept of building power was the fact that as we build power, others were trying to take it. And as they was trying to take it, we must protect it. In this moment, whatever power we have, we got to protect it. And the protected is keeping these type dialogues going, not in the public, but in private as we display in public the successes, the struggles that we all go through. The NAACP is critical for me because it allowed me that leg up. Growing up in the hood of Detroit, I knew nothing about the NAACP, but going to Tougaloo College, HBCU, it allowed me to understand the value of investing in our institutions. And that's where we are right now. In this pandemic crisis, the NAACP is our institution. That's why it's important when Ed and I talked about how do we pull something together in Detroit this past summer. I'm glad I'm full circle to do this. This dialogue will continue. And it need all of the voices. Ben Crump and I, we talk about things that we can do together. This is that moment where we can start building an opportunity. And it's not based on an individual personality. It's based on a collective effort by all of us. Naeem Akbar talk about collective consciousness. This is our moment to build that collective consciousness. And if you're listening, if you are tuning in, we got to support our institutions, whether they're HBC, whether there's the Black Church or Miles or the NAACP. So we're going to continue this dialogue. Thank all of you for joining as we will have more of these discussions in the future. Take care.
Thank you.
Appreciate you guys, man.
Peace.
Peace.
Peace.